Hi, this is no ordinary voice of spiritual ventriloquism. You are listening to the dummy himself. Well, how's everybody doing this evening? Well, talked about subject of hair and head coverings. Had a brother Tristan wanted to know something about Genesis 6, about the Watchers, or the Nephilim, as they call it. And the Nephilim were actually the descendants of the Watchers. So, anyway, that brother wanted me to address that. So, I decided to go ahead and address it. Where did they come from? Genesis 6. Also spoke about that I was going to talk about Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, about how there's a mistranslation where it says a woman's hair was given her for a covering. Actually means, should be translated, and a woman's hair was given her for a testicle. I'm going to show you how these two things come together. These two things come together because Paul had a fear, real or imagined, okay, that these Benei Eloihim, as this brother was referring to in Genesis 6, these Benei Elohim came down from Mount Hermon, which also plays into why Jesus, and I learned this from Dr. Heiser, my sources on this. Dr. Michael Heiser, The Unseen Realm, you should get it. You should have read it already. If you really want to open up some understanding on getting your mind to think like at least a first century Israelite, better yet, a Bronze Age Israelite, because the two are remarkably different. Post-exilic and pre-exilic, two different cats. So anyway, these Benei Elohim, these Watchers, came down, and they basically came down and started raping women and produced a warrior class of beings called the Nephilim. Okay, these were centered around Bashan and other places, of course, but the Bible says there were giants in the earth in those days and after that. Now, the problem is that we have been reared up in New Testament Christianity, and we assume that when Jesus speaks that in the when they gave him that, said the woman had 7 husbands, whose wife shall she be in the kingdom? And Jesus said, you don't even know the scriptures. Okay, he said that they shall be as the angels. So we think automatically that means we're going to be like angels. So angels never reproduced or could reproduce. Well, the text doesn't actually say that they couldn't do it, but the text says that they did do it. Okay, and there's no way to go grocery shopping around that to try to make them out to be that the sons of Shem intermarried with the descendants of Cain, or the line of Cain, and produced these 7 to 9 feet on the average giants. And let's just get rid of this Photoshop contest crap on Facebook where they're 30 feet tall and skulls the size of frickin' Volkswagen cars and stuff like that. that started out as a Photoshop contest. There's no place in the Smithsonian Institution where they're hiding this thing. You know, it's kind of like the flat Earth. You know, everything's some goddamn conspiracy. And the biggest conspiracy is most people's intelligence being compromised by whatever they give their ear to. But anyway, I'm not ragging on the flat Earth. I think flat Earth is fine. You won't believe that. That's fine. What I don't like is when people try to make that as some kind of a litmus test, you know. Get a few of them. Some of them are more accommodating, like my brother Gene, whom I haven't heard for in a while. I need to give him a call, see how he's doing. You know, he basically said that, you know, if you believe in the ball earth, it will lead you to receiving the mark of the beast. You're destined for it, basically. I digress from that. No fault of his own. That's what he believes. That's what he believes. However, there's others out there that are, you know, I call them flat earth terrorists. You're not even saved. You don't believe the Bible, because they've turned God's Bible, Yah's Bible, into their goddamn mad scientist experiment. The Bible wasn't given for you to set up your little laboratory in your mind to answer all of the questions of science. Now, the Bible does contain some science, okay? But the Bible was not given to us, wasn't written. The prophets of old didn't speak in the realm of equations and, you know, factoring, you know, azimuths and all of that stuff. Cat fight. I haven't seen one of them in a while. Wow. The Bible wasn't given to you for the purpose of you figuring out all the mysteries of the scientific universe. The Bible was given as a theological document, and you do violence to the scripture when you try to make it out to be something it's not. And that's just plain and simple. So the scripture says if you're ever going to have friends, you're going to have to show yourself friendly, and some of you aren't doing too well. I can tell you that much. So, and, you know, wisdom is justified for children, of course. So, anyway, the angels came down, raped women, produced giants, okay? They're not the descendants of Shem. What we need to do is we need to stop trying to figure out what Scripture is saying and just let it speak for itself. There's a lot of things I would talk to you. A lot of it you couldn't bear right now. It would just blow you away, okay? Like the schematic ages of the patriarchs rather than literal ones. The miracle of Abraham having a baby at 100 years old when his father had a child at 130. Nothing spectacular there. It's not like it was unheard of. The miracle was that she had been barren for so long in her life. That was the miracle. So let's throw out this speculation on ages. I mean, Abraham's also the first one mentioned in the scriptures as living a good life, full of days. And yet he only lived to be 175. Noah was like, 600? Shem, 542 or whatever. Go back to Methuselah, 969. I mean, Abraham's not setting any records here, okay? So, and if you go back to the Sumerian kings list, they gave honorific ages to their kings of, 30 and 40,000 years of age. So they were doing things with numbers. Literal ages didn't mean that much to people back then. You lived and you died. Okay? It was how you lived and how you died, what you pumped out of your fountain and what you restrained from. That's what counts. Okay? Hallelujah. Anyway. So, anyhow, Paul, obviously, in his address of head coverings, had a fear, real or imagined, that these giants could come back down again and once again do what was done in the days of old. Hair and head coverings weren't given, to placate some religious sensibilities. Okay, there was a specific reason for that, and it may have been in mythos, and it may have been served kind of as a talisman, if you will. Now, I know some people are going to freak out and go just ape shit over that statement. Okay, well, if a woman, as voluptuous as she might be, puts on a head covering, and that's going to keep a guy from, or a spirit or an angel from raping her, what the hell are you going to call it? Okay? Really, if that's not a talisman, I don't know what is. Okay? And you really would serve yourself well to come to grips with that fact, that there's a commonality of things that have gone on in the ancient ages, and some of those things later, Yah told them to dispense with, like, gouging your eyebrows out with a rock in the forehead just because somebody dies, or ripping your clothes, or, stuff like that, funerary rites and things like that. It wasn't that they were bad. Yah never judged the world for it. He didn't say, I'm mad at the world because they're doing these things. He just basically said he wanted to set Israel apart. Okay? In the ancient world, the kings were, basically killing men and taking their wives. Or haven't you read the book? And yet Yah says you don't do those things. That's some plastic cement on my arm. Guess I've been working, contrary to popular belief. So, anyway, so the head covering was a talisman, and I think it was a way of marking, just like Yah had set a mark or a talisman on Cain, which was an obvious sign to everyone around that he was a marked man and you weren't to touch him. So let's just, get out of our religious stupor, our religious drunkenness, and look at things for what they really are. So, and the reason was, in 1Cor11 chapter 11, Paul was trying to establish patriarchy in a Gentile church. He was trying to establish patriarchy, Israelite type patriarchy, true Israelite type patriarchy, not, multi-level marketing patriarchy, but true patriarchy, which is every man is the king of his own house. That's if it's his own house. Okay? What we buy into is the multi-level marketing patriarchy, which makes it a whole lot easier, because it doesn't require anything of us. We just show up and punch the clock, Some of us work hard, some of us don't. So, anyway, so Paul's establishing patriarchy. So, because that was a custom that was ordained by man, and it was a quasi-law because of the customary practice that was replete throughout the ancient world. This is not something that was just specific to the Israelites. The Canaanites did it. The Egyptians did it. The Sumerians did it. All the ancient Mesopotamians did it. And it was because of this particular event. So they set a talisman on the woman's head, which would tell these spirits that this woman was covered And it was like no touchy, no feely, no talky, that kind of thing. You think these angels are going to listen to man? They're going to get what they want. But when Yah, and he could have had something to do with this, but there's nothing written in the book that says he did. So either Yah suggested the custom, or man took that custom upon themselves, and Yah then folded that custom into Israelite law under Moses, specifically in the book of Numbers, chapter 5, in a law of jealousy. Okay, so there we go. These Benei Eloihim descended upon Mount Hermon. Okay, now we know that the first place that Joshua attacked was Mount Hermon. Okay, and the place where Jesus took his disciples and was transfigured and glorified in a state or in a vision was on Mount Hermon. Basically, he's planting his pennant on the devil's 50-yard line, because the word Hermon is horma in the Aramaic. It's horma. Horma means to devote to destruction or to destroy. Okay? These angels came down and they were devoted to the destruction of the genealogy and to pollute the genealogies of mankind. Therefore, Yah devoted them to destruction, not only with the flood, but also under Joshua. That was the first place they attacked, was Og, king of Bashan, of the Ammonites, and which was the chief tribe of the 7 tribes. Not all the Canaanites were under the ban, but 7 nations were under the ban. Okay, and they were to destroy every one of them. It was total genocide, because these 7 tribes had their genealogies mingled with the giant clans of the Nephilim. Okay, so that was the reason they had to be destroyed. Okay, so I hope that answers the brother's question, and perhaps we'll get a response from him. I'm not sure who it was. Off-Grid Victory, I think, was the one who asked that question. It was a good question. So, anyway, that's what happened. And without dragging this thing out more than what it needs to be, because I have 2 hours of videos on hair and head coverings, I will talk briefly about the situation that Paul was faced with and the issue that he was trying to address in 1 Corinthians chapter 11. A woman's hair, in Greek times, the Greek physicians believed that a woman's hair functioned as a sexual organ, not just a symbol of her sensuality or her virility or her fertility or whatever you want to call it. Aristotle, Hippocrates, they believed that a woman's hair functioned as a sexual organ. Therefore, and no doubt they didn't get this from the scientific method from the Bible, because there is none. It's just a custom. However, I think science early on built some of its ideas. Paul addressed some of this. Whether he believed this or not, I don't know. But Paul, and if you really want to read an in-depth account of this custom, was a woman's hair is Dr. I'll have to get his name, is Dr. Troy something in his Loyola University or whatever, School of Theology. And excellent. Excellent writing you can find on academia. So, you know, the Greek physicians had idea that it functions as a sexual organ, that her hair, the length of hair when the youth, was a symbol of virility or fertility, I should say, fertility. With the woman, I think it's more fertility. But anyway, the hair acted as a drawing mechanism, like a magnet, so that when man and woman co-joined, that it would draw the man's seed further up into her system, and therefore conception would be made. And obviously, when women get older, their hair starts thinning out. Some, they start becoming infertile. Some of their hair starts falling out sometimes, and different things. It grays, it changes color, and things like that. So the idea that the Greek physicians had, was that this was a symbol of infertility, and so they thought that, for a woman to have her hair cut off would make her infertile. And they had even things like they would put garlic suppositories in their cervix or up in their vagina, and they would tell them to come back the next day or a couple of days later, and then the physicians would smell the hair of their head, and if their head smelled like garlic, they were pronounced fertile. If it didn't smell like garlic, they were pronounced infertile. But then we found out later that bald women can get pregnant too. So much for Greek physicians, huh? So anyway, now whether Paul actually believed the science of that day is not known. He could have biases and things like that, just like any other person who ascribes to a certain doctrine or teaching or application of profession or whatever. We don't know. We do know this much, that Paul did put emphasis on the hair or head covering upon married women. In an Israelite custom, married women were to have their head covered in prayer or in public assembly. They were in the privacy of their own home. They didn't have to wear a head covering. It wasn't mandatory. But if they were going to go out into the marketplace and mingle amongst the people, there's more cement. They were required to cover their hair, so anyway, that's what they did, and it was based on custom. At least I think, as far as Paul's thoughts were concerned, not so much with the current medical technology of the day, which wasn't much. Okay, I'll leave that much to you. So I'll throw the flat earthers a bone here. Which wasn't much. They may have had the mathematics down, but they certainly lacked vision when it came to theological constructs and things like that, obviously. So, which I think should throw me into my next video here. I want to speak on clothing again, things like that. I might have done enough on that already. Or maybe I should move on to something new. Everybody's wanting to hear something new. So anyway, how does Brother Rich make the statement that the hair was given instead of a testicle contrary to what is translated in most Bibles, for a covering. And that is because in the ancient Greek, especially in the writings of Euripides, okay, in the ancient Greek, the word Probolan is normal for covering. But the word that was used, I believe, is pretty substantial because of the connotations of talismans and copulation between spirits, or spirits of whoremongering on men, or whatever. You know, the hair covering does have a tendency to denote a little bit more of a barrier, or more of a respect for women, and I'm sure that everyone can agree to that. So Euripides talked about in his youth when he had received his bags of flesh, and that Greek word that Euripides used for that, he's talking about his testicles, he's talking about his scrotum. The Greek word that he used was Probolan. He didn't use the Greek word orchis, which is where you would get the word testicle. But it was very important. He used, when I received my bags of flesh, I went the way of most young men. Okay? All right? So what you have there, instead of the word orchis being used, which means testicle, you have the word Probolan being put in there. And I think that's for a very important reason, because in ancient Israelite custom, you never referred to genitalia or anything like that directly. I'm sure they had words for it, but they didn't speak those words. They would use euphemistic language, or they would use idiomatic expressions, so that when the speaker used certain words, the idea, what it really meant, was being conveyed to the hearer, but he didn't actually have to say it. In two places in the book of Job, this type of language is used, where they forego speaking directly. And see, that's something else I want to tell you. When you speak to a person of Middle Eastern descent, and you speak about anatomy directly, especially in a contrary matter, I've heard it before. I've heard one such instance of this, and I think it was probably the most pissed off I think I've ever been in my life, to actually hear this come out of somebody's mouth. When you directly refer to a woman's anatomy in a public discourse, you are, and I mean, you're in the lowest of low at that point, and you are drunk. I don't know what you've been drinking, but you are flat out drunk. And it offends the sensibilities of those types of people. You know, the types of people who actually are much closer to the culture that you think you're paddling and blazing the trail for. Okay? We have to quit being so self-deceived and self-deluded. Okay? Because it doesn't serve us well. It'll be our undoing. So, anyway, you don't speak of things in the book of Job. It talks about the behemoth, it says, who's swings his tail like a cedar. That is a phallic reference to what is considered an aleph, or a chief bull, an authority, a god, so to speak. You could even apply it that way. And also it says in that text, whose sinews are so closely knit together that no air can pass through them. Now, I'm going to tell you something. Only a man knows what that means, really knows what that means. A woman could probably kind of follow along and kind of like, oh, I think they're talking about this, at least the sober ones. But only a man knows what that means, okay? But he didn't have to actually say it. He could put it in an expressive language and let the thought come forward, and people could learn and could hear what Job was actually saying here. So that's like I'm saying, you have language that is being expressive. So Paul is actually guiding. He's actually cloaking by using the word Probolan, which means an overhanging cloth. Okay, that kind of discloses the face. Hangs. Probolan means to hang down. Okay, all right. That's the type of covering that women were supposed to wear in those days in a public assembly, or as Paul said, when they're praying, okay? Even in their own home, okay? They should cover their heads. So a woman's hair was given to her instead of a testicle. So the sexual reference is there. The sexual symbology is there. Is all there, and that's what differentiates a woman from a man. Why doesn't a man wear a head covering? That's because he has testicles. He doesn't need to cover his head. He's already covered his bottom half of his torso with adequate clothing, so that that's covered too. So anyway, I hope you just learned something from all of this rambling and whatnot. And peace to you, and peace to Israel. I hope that everyone profits thereby. Shalom, shalom, shalom.